Amazon, and I manage pricing for India, which is pricing products and the program aspect as well. I also build tools for various affordability levers in India, which is your no-cost EMI or exchange or your cashback. So the whole affordability plus pricing charter. Of course, a lot of customer feedback around how Flipkart is giving better offers or Amazon is not really matching some of those offers. But yeah, I think over time everything will get sorted out, and our goal is to build Amazon for a sustainable longer term. So yes, I've spent about 6 years in product management in various companies, as Vintage spoke about. I'm going to take this session specifically on how should every product leader look at managing a consumer internet product, and we'll go through some slides, and you can have ask me questions in the end. How many of you have actually worked with a product manager in your past work experience? Worked with a product manager? Okay. And I assume everybody in this room would want to move towards product management at some point. Okay, great. That's the right audience then. So let's get started with two different approaches to product management, and one is probably an input-driven approach where you do your best to improve your inputs, and you don't really worry about outputs, which could be conversion rate or revenue or GMS. So it's an extremely customer backwards approach where you look at what the customer wants, and you do whatever is important to reduce the friction with the customer's experience with the product, and you try to optimize on those inputs. You don't really worry about what's my conversion rate going to be, what's my revenue going to be. But in Amazon especially, that is the culture which is followed, and we optimize inputs like pricing, selection, in stock, fast track delivery, or search, or product discovery. We don't really worry about what's our conversion rate. That's a very Indian e-commerce sort of a stigma, which is, hey, I want to increase my conversion. What do you do about it? And you've got to probably look at these inputs first. Only then the conversion goes up. But it's not output backwards. So some companies are output driven as well. It means they'll resolve the customer pain points. They'll be customer backwards too, but they'll start with the outcome first. Okay, what is it that we are achieving? And what is the business outcome which we want to achieve? And then, okay, let's resolve the customer problems which come in the way. I'm not saying any of these approaches, work well for a specific setup. It could be that output-driven approach also works for certain companies, and it might work for certain new startups as well. However, what we've experienced as Amazon and that the input-driven approach works really well in the longer term, where you basically get the entire organization working in a very customer backwards way and looking to resolve customer problems and not look at metrics like GMS or revenue. I'll give you an example. So I used to work at Ola, and I used to be responsible for improving pickups for Ola. And what we launched in Ola was a feature called Snap to Pickup Location. So if you've probably taken 3 or more rides from this college, and you book sitting inside this campus, and you actually take your ride, start your ride from, let's say, 200 meters away, it would save your frequently picked up location, and that would, it would just snap your pickup pin to that location. So that was a feature I launched at Ola, and somebody in the management team asked me, hey, what's the business impact? I said, oh, we've got customers taking great rides, the pickup time is reduced, and the driver is taking less time to reach the customer. The pickup accuracy is improved. So eventually your utilization or the driver earnings will go up because he stays on the road longer, because he spends lesser time on finding the customer. But he was like, okay, tell me what's the impact on revenue? This is not the feature to talk about revenue eventually, right? I mean, I can do that calculation, do that math, that hey, utilization is up X%, or the customer retention is up X%, but it's not easy to, figure out in the first week of launch, what is the impact on revenue? And I'm not saying that is a wrong question to ask. It's just the company culture, where some companies are input-driven and some companies are output-driven, and just happen to work in both the cultures. And personally, I believe the whole input-driven culture is a lot more easier and a lot more relaxed than chasing outputs from everything you ship. So yeah, it's important to look at expected outcomes. It's important to look at what your feature will do for customers. It's important to look at even the business metrics. Hey, how is it moving? But that is not the only thing which will define what will you do as a product manager. Sure. So we'll move forward on another structural change which is probably there in certain companies. It is the pod structure versus the specialization structure. Now, what's a pod? Now, a pod is a structure where you have one PM, a bunch of devs, one designer, and maybe a small team working on a certain feature. So that small team is responsible for shipping that feature, taking it to a logical point where it's working and it's perfectly working for customers, and then hey, move on to do something else, or just have one or two engineers working on the back end of that feature once it's shipped. So that's a pod structure where you have a bunch of people working on a single feature and it's cross-functional. Everybody sits together. It's like a war room where engineers, you've got PM, designers, you've got different people looking to release that feature, and you've got various pods like that. So Airbnb works on a very pod-specific structure. They have various pods of product people, designers, and devs together, and they work on a single feature. And that is how it's to work at Zynga as well, where there were different pods managing different games in that sense. So different products too, but then very often we'll have these bold beat releases, which would be really needle movers to the company, and then we'll have specific pods working on specific releases. So it's very fast. This method is really fast, and you can ship one feature with great UX. A very standard way of looking at things is the other one, which is the specialization structure, where you have teams which are working on specific products, where the PMs would sit together, the client-side devs would sit together, the server-side devs would sit together. They'll be part of one team, but not really part of a single pod. And then this is very, very useful for creating complicated products and products which require a lot of quality standards. But it's a little slower, and it does become a little slower because you've now different teams looking at their own interests, and now it's a little slower in terms of the pod structure. So the speciality of the team is built on a certain skill, which could be front end development or server side development, or it could be just a team of product managers who manage individual products but part of the same team. But it's just very specialized. Now Amazon works in that way. Of course, when they're launching Echo or when they're launching some high-profile projects, they would create a simpler pod structure, but that's only for very critical projects which need to be shipped really fast. Otherwise, it's the standard specialization structure which is followed. The other thing about product managers, of course, and given that this is the first semester of your course, you can't not repeat that you have to empathize with the users of your product. The users of your product are not people in this room, are people in different pin codes of India. If you're really working for an Indian startup or an Indian company, your users are not people like you with the latest smartphones, but rather a 2G phone or a low-end feature phone. So very, very important to empathize with your users, know what is happening in their lives. So if I work for affordability at Amazon, we would rather imagine somebody who wants to buy a sari, which is 3,000 rupees, doesn't really have the money to pay up front. Should I enable a no-cost EMI on a sari? Now, these are the problems we are actually faced with in Amazon, where you decide which persona of the customer are you targeting. What is happening in that customer's life? What is the motivation for that customer to use your website or web product? And you got to basically put yourself in their shoes, put that persona up front, and then decide what is it that you're building, what is it the customer wants. So digging deep into customer surveys and user personas is really important. And it's not going to be just one single customer. It's going to be different first customers who come to your product for different reasons. And which is why it's important to know different types of customers, build personas, do surveys, understand those surveys, really look at customer anecdotes seriously. So you can't be having, hey, somebody got his washing machine in 10 days, where it normally ships in 2 days. But that's important. Why did that happen? So in Amazon, we have this culture of 5 whys. So if somebody reaches out to, Jeff Bezos or Amit Agarwal on an email, they would send us question mark emails back that, hey, how did that happen? And for every question mark email, you're going to list down 5 whys. That, why did this happen? Why was the customer unhappy? And then every why would end with a sentence which would lead to the next question. So that sort of a culture is really important to not just look at customer anecdotes seriously, but also make sure that you're building programs and processes where every anecdote, the issue which the customer faced is not repeated, again. And that's why Amazon over time keeps getting better and better, because we keep getting these customer anecdotes and we keep making those fixes for those customers. You should always be thinking as a product manager and how can you improve customer stickiness and satisfaction, and you've got to be thinking that every day, every day if you're working on a product management role. How can you really increase the customer satisfaction and stickiness in the platform? And that's why you're there. That's why the role exists of a product manager. You're there as a customer advocate in the company. 4 skills. Now, problem solving is one of the most important skills for a product manager, and you've got to be always deconstructing. So whatever works in your product, you should know what works and why. Whatever doesn't work in your product, you should know why doesn't it work. And you should always be thinking, whatever product you're managing or whatever products around you, how can you improve this product 10x? And that's always going to be a key role for a product manager. Know what is working, know what doesn't work, and then improve, go fix it. And then know how can things be scaled. And increase the usage or the engagement of the product itself. So that's really critical. And good PMs are people who are often wrong. So my gut about that female who wanted to buy a sari for 3,000 rupees doesn't have the money was wrong 1 month back. And I was not thinking even about that female. I was thinking maybe she has the money to buy a sari. Maybe she needs no-cost EMI on a TV. And I was wrong when I actually, got to know about that customer anecdote that, hey, she's saving up to buy a sari and she needs no-cost EMI on a sari. So that's something I didn't know. And I'm often wrong in figuring out what the persona is. And it's always good to be wrong. And it's always good to be experimenting, You got to learn and change based on data and based on customer interviews, validations, and confessions. And that's really important for a product manager. Agree that you're wrong. You will be wrong. I'm not saying you'll be always wrong, but you will be wrong many times. And it's good to be wrong because you get to learn a lot when you're wrong. So the other important thing for a PM is the relentless focus on making sure the users complete the core loop of your product. Now, you've got to identify why is it that customers come to me. For example, big basket. People want to buy groceries and get it delivered really fast. Now, and they want to build a cart and just get a delivery slot and then choose, when they want to get the product and get it at the doorstep. That's the core loop of big basket. And every product will have their core loops. Now, Pinterest would have pinning as a core action or a core loop. Snapchat is snapping. Twitter is tweeting. YouTube is uploading a video or watching a video now. I mean, when it started, it was more of uploading a video. And then Ola has this use case of getting a car and traveling hassle-free, or But then Ola, identified that, hey, this is a pain point. If you open Uber and try to book it, it probably takes a longer time to book than Ola, because Uber has a broadcast model where the request goes to multiple drivers. It's a perfect marketplace in that sense. The driver decides, I want this ride or not, and then he comes to you. So booking in Uber takes a little more time than Ola, and that is why, because Ola directly gives the booking to a certain driver who's agreed to be on the road at that time, and which is why it reduces the time to book. It's simpler. It's a lot easier for somebody who's not very familiar with internet to book on Ola versus Uber. And again, we as users who are very, very digitally acclimatized, we don't really face those problems. But if you go to somebody in a tier 2 town and ask him to book a cab, he'll likely book it faster than Ola, because of one of those reasons is because the UI is simpler and it's easy to understand. The other one is that Ola just assigns you a driver instead of sending the request to somebody accepting it. So that core loop, and that's what I'm coming to. The core loop is really important. So as a PM, you've got to be always thinking, what is my core loop? And how can I make users go through that core loop really fast? So if I'm somebody who's working on Candy Crush, for example, in a game, what's the core loop of Candy Crush? Hey, I got to complete that 2-3 minute bite-sized game because I got to crush those candies and then, achieve a new level or a new score. And that's my core loop. I got to finish that game 3 minutes from now, achieve a new level, and then just go through it. So that's my core loop. How do I make it fun, engaging, and enjoyable? And that's where PMs come in and say, once you've identified the core loop, once you know it works, then how do you make sure the user gets through it really fast in a really fun way? And that's really critical for you to know what your core loop is going to be wherever you start working. So the other thing about product management is that the product should have, keep getting better as the time progresses. So if I'm using Big Basket today, it knows that I'm going to buy this Haldiram Namkeen every 2 weeks, or it knows that I'm going to buy this brand of 10 kg atta every 3 weeks. It knows my address. I put in all the payment methods in Big Basket. It's very hard for me not to buy from Big Basket because if I go to Grofers today and I don't really have those payment methods saved, address saved, and all my preferences on what I buy normally in a cart, it's very hard for me to go to Grofers and start over all over again. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there is a cost for me now that I have to move away from Big Basket and go to some other place because I have to do all those things again and again. Now, that's where the more you use the product, there is data science and there is machine learning, which is behind all these products. And whichever product you work with, data science and machine learning is a key input to all great products. And so those are your best friends, the data scientists and machine learning teams in your organization. You got to go to them and say, hey, I've got a ton of data on my customers. How do I use it better? Now, can you give me some ideas? I want to do these 10 things. They'll give you 20 more. So now you have 30 things you want to do using data science and using the data you already have with the customer. And it's the customer footprint or his behavior with the product. And you can do a lot more. So those things are always going to be there, but you should always keep it at the back of your head that it's important to improve the customer experience. It's important to tell the customer that, hey, if you move away from my product now, there's going to be a cost to pay. So it's harder and harder for him to move away now. That's critical. Now, a product manager is a juggler. He's a mediator and he's a corporate hustler. Now, when I say corporate hustler, it's because very often as product guys, you'll be part of exec review meetings where you'll be justifying what are you doing for the next 1 year or next 6 months or the next quarter. And you've got to be really good at that. Because if the founders of the company or the executives do not really buy into your vision, you will not get developers. And if you do not get developers, you will not be able to ship anything. So it's very important for you to be a good corporate hustler. Create a vision and sell it to the management and tell this is the customer benefit or this is the output benefit, whichever way your company works. I'm not saying any approach is wrong, but it's very important to convince everybody to invest in your products, to tell them what is the output, what is it in for the customer or for the company. And also, you got to learn to do multiple things the same day, but do one at a time. If you do too many things at the same time, you're likely going to screw up a lot of things because multitasking in product management, even though it's required, it's very hard. So you got to do multiple things in the same day, but look at every 30-minute slot or every 1 hour slot. Plan your day that they're going to knock down things today, and these are the 10 things I'm going to knock down. But do it really well, and that's important for you in the long-term history in career and product management. That every day you spend, every hour you spend in the office is spent on doing constructive things. And in a typical day, not in any order of priority, you're going to be super busy. So tracking metrics, which is, every day you come to your office and you look at what metrics have moved in the last 1 day or last 1 week. Writing specs for new features. Attending scrums with devs, super important because they all need you to support them what they should be building and take questions. Sprint planning meetings, preparing for leadership reviews, whiteboarding with designers and fellow PMs, very, very important. Doing release plannings, what ships when and how. Customer anecdotes and issues which will keep coming in your mailbox from various sources. Preparing your feature reviews, you've just shipped something and then you're going to be telling people how did that do. And then experimentation, A/B testing, super important for you to build the right thing. Alignment meetings, now these are really important because you'll be aligning the management and other teams around you that this is what you want to ship today, and then tell them that this is my roadmap for next year and this is what they have to do to make you successful. So that's super important. Attending leadership review meetings, again, telling them what you're doing, where is the company headed, looking at other teams which are doing something else which might impact you and the customer. So that's super important. You'll be having a ton of emails, but all this while you've got to ensure that you have some thinking time as well, because unless you really think ahead and unless you really think and plan on your roadmap, it's just very difficult for you to execute going forward. Everything you think, everything you plan takes a little while to ship. So thinking time is really important. People. Now, a product manager is going to manage teams going forward, but those will be product teams only. And that too will take a few years before you actually start managing product teams. However, you're going to be working with a lot of people who will not be reporting to you directly. So it's very important to spend a lot of time framing the vision and mission of your team and your product and articulating the same across the organization that, hey, I work for the pricing team in Amazon and this is the vision of the pricing team that, hey, I want to make prices on Amazon really cheap and affordable. And I got to be articulating that same vision across the organization. Why is pricing important and why I need inputs from different teams to make that happen. So that's super critical. Outline goals and top metrics to track before the feature is shipped. Now, that's really important because very often product managers ship features and then they invent metrics to track after the feature is shipped. To be religious as a product manager and to learn from what you're shipping. It's very important to know beforehand what is the metric you want to track, because that's super important for you to learn how is the product doing and versus the expectations you had before the launch happened. Rally the entire team behind the goal. Again, very important. If your devs are not aligned to the goal, they'll not be stretching themselves to work super hard on your vision. They have to be aligned to what you're doing. They have to know this is the customer problem you're trying to solve. Everything you're doing should have a customer problem. Even an internal tool you build for test automation will have customers and will have internal customers. So everything you're doing is for some customer, whether it's external or internal in some cases. And people work better when they have contributed to an idea. So if you take a bunch of developers along with you to a room and discuss, this is what we want to do. And at the end of the meeting, even if you throw ideas, everybody sitting in the room should be happy that they have delivered on the vision of the feature or what they want to do. So if you make people believe the idea came from them, it's always easier for them to contribute wholeheartedly. If you are a PM who just says, takes a stick along and says, these are the 10 things to do, that may not work, my friend, because that's not how people work with you. So it's very important to have everybody, developers, QA, designers, involved in the discussions before you freeze on the product spec. It's important for them to be sold on the vision, and it's important for you to work as a team together rather than being a super bossy. So the whole concept of product manager being the mini CEO, I don't agree with it because it's not true. It's not easy, and that should not be how it should be looked at. It's a team effort to build products, and whoever has been working with product managers already is probably aware that's how products are built. And a product manager is a facilitator of ideas in the team, and he's a customer advocate within the team to make sure you build the right thing. So that's about managing people. Communication is the key. Having excellent written communication and oral communication is a prerequisite for a product manager. And you're going to always set a high bar in the meetings you drive, in the reviews you drive, in the quality of the BRDs or the specs you write. Super important to set that high bar. And only when you set that high bar can you hold people accountable to that bar and make sure everybody in the team is performing to that bar. Write the best documents. So writing a product spec is super important, making sure everybody understands it. In Amazon, we write press releases. So if this feature ships 6 months from now, how will the press talk about it? And so writing a press release when you haven't shipped anything yet, but you know what the feature is, that's super important. So you can articulate the customer opportunity that, hey, this is what my feature is going to do to the customer. And then we also have formats of writing press releases. So the first paragraph should be about, the elevator pitch you're giving to a customer, that when you meet him in a lift, that, hey, customer, this is what I've shipped for you today, and this is how it's going to benefit you. And then you build onto that in the following paragraph. So having a super awesome spec and a product press release, very important. You also will work on many leadership docs. So whether it's the founder of a startup or it's the executives in a MNC, everybody wants to know what you're working on. What is the program driving? What is the product going to do? So that leadership review you write, you're representing the team in that review, and it's super important for you to write it well, make sure it's coherent and well understood. And yes, when you're communicating with the team and whatever processes you've set up, don't let it break down. There'll be challenges, there'll be exec overload, there'll be scary things happening. But your team is your biggest asset, and you should always make sure that your behavior with the team and your interactions with them always are professional, friendlier, and you're not over aggressive, because you're facing some issues which could, a developer may not know what challenges you're facing on the business side. Now you're going to tell them in a very easy to understand way, but it's also important to maintain that camaraderie, that relationship which you have with the team. Otherwise, you will not be able to successfully ship things on time. And this is just a slide on how is product management at Amazon different. We are relentlessly focused on the customer. The scale is huge, so people work in a lot of depth. So if I do pricing, I'll be doing pricing and other things related to pricing mostly. I'll not be looking at customer experience or other things. But it's important because the scale is huge. So you work in a narrow vertical, but it's important for you to dive deep and do it really well. And that's how roles differ in Amazon. In some other companies, roles could be a lot of breadth, where you don't dive deep that much, where you have few product managers working with you, so you don't really have a lot of people working with you. So it's a lot of breadth versus depth. Amazon has always been a lot of depth versus the breadth. There are tenets for every team and program. Now, tenets guide us what to do when we are having confusion around what is the best way to move forward. So those tenets are really important. Every team in Amazon has their tenets, that this is how we're going to work, and that's super critical. There are lots of partner teams, so aligning everyone to your vision is important. So if you are shipping something on the buy box, which is the buy box you see when you open Amazon, go to a product page, and that price you're seeing is being fetched from different services. Now, whatever is around that buy box is when it does it ship, or all those details. If you start changing anything which is there on the display page, it's super critical. So there are a lot of partner teams involved, and it's important to align everyone so that your vision to your vision, and that's how things will work. So a lot of meetings, alignment discussions are required. You've got to be excelling at that. So need to be really good at those communications. And we also have a lot of 6-pager docs, very famous 6-pager documents of Amazon. So you got to write those leadership review documents very often, and they take a lot of time. But it's super important because they tell the management what you're working on, what is the strategy. And Amazon doesn't really have a PPT culture. So this is after a long time I've actually made a PowerPoint slide. So we have a doc culture where you write docs and you take prints, and everybody sits together in a room and you read those docs, and then the discussion starts 20 minutes later. So that's how Amazon works. However, there is a different product structure at Ola, where I used to work before Amazon, and there are 70 product managers part of different teams and charters. So customer experience is one of them. That is the consumer app. Everything to do with the consumer app, whether it's the first screen or the last screen, that team manages the consumer app. Then you have customer acquisition and engagement, and that's a charter I manage at Ola, where you look at how do I get customers, how do I build APIs for, let's say, an Amazon to integrate on its app and get me new customers, or for a Tabzo or a help chat to integrate on their app and get me customers. That's a very API focus. Also building products for referral management and those things. Then comes the engagement bit, where basis the user's history, how can I improve his experience? Now that would be how can I give you better pickups, or how can I suggest you better drop locations? When you open your app, you see a list of drop locations. Basis your engagement with the app, how do I make it better? So those were that was a charter which I used to manage. Then there is booking experience. The moment you press confirm booking, and till the time the car arrives, and that is what that team does. Building products in the back end, both to the driver and the customer, to make sure you have a seamless booking experience. And then you have allocation and pricing. So allocation is once you press the confirm booking request, and once the driver actually comes to you, there's a team which decides which all drivers can possibly serve you, what's their distance from the location where you're requesting it, and then what's the price you're paying when you actually put the drop location. So that's that team. Then there is supply products. Just like you have a consumer experience team, there is a supply team as well. There's a driver app. There is an app for operators to manage different taxis. There is payments and Ola Money. That's a separate team altogether. Then the separate team on Ola Share, which is managing the share experience and how to put multiple people in the same cab. Then there is Ola Play, which is a new experience in your prime cars. And then there is Ola website, and then there is customer care as well. So all these are verticals in which product managers work. All of these are equally important to give seamless service to the customer, and that's how Ola is structured. So it's pretty similar in terms of exactly. It's pretty similar in that sense. Yes. Right. So a lot of people work seamlessly. So in Amazon, it's very input focused. So if I'm doing pricing, I've got to give the customer the best price possible, and I don't need to interact with, let's say, somebody who is doing on delivery, right? I mean, I don't need to interact with those people a whole lot. Of course, when we meet in leadership reviews and there are problems to solve, we all meet together and decide the roadmap. Mm-hmm. Yes. Exactly. Mm-hmm. 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 So in Amazon, we have different teams to do. Right. So if the sales are increasing and somebody is telling, hey, you're really selling it cheap, and my orders are increasing. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. That's a very good question to ask. I'm just thinking it is probably very specific to Flipkart. We don't think of it prices just to make sure that somebody should not be selling more or. That's a conversation that you whether you have to give a price discount or So what happens in Amazon is the category decides the prices. I mean, I build products for, for them to, set the prices and for sellers to set the prices. The category decides, what are the sales looking, and then it tells sellers. So Amazon doesn't decide prices in India because everything is controlled by different sellers. So category can then work with sellers and say, hey seller, I'm going to launch a Diwali sale. I'm going to probably give you a better commission, in terms of, so we charge sellers a commission. So that's how Amazon can influence. Exactly. But I've never, so this is the whole thing about, hey, I'm giving a bad experience to somebody, so I should reduce the price now. That is something which we don't work that way. We have our own tenets around how prices should be allowed, how sellers should be setting prices, and that's how we work. We don't let, a lot of operational things change our key inputs. Mm-hmm. Right, so Amazon's way would be to fix that input, which is the installation input is getting late. How do we, create an army of people to install it? There are different teams to achieve it. Sure. So we had a lot of customer feedback on deliveries not going to the customer on time. So there were certain sellers who would not ship it to Amazon. So how it works is there is fulfilled by Amazon, where the seller actually tells us that, hey, this is my inventory, keep it in your warehouse, and then whenever the order comes, just ship it. That experience is much controllable because Amazon builds those warehouses, and we've got those robotic equipment which will make sure that it's shipped on time. However, there were sellers who were not agreeing to send their goods to Amazon's warehouses, and that was a very India specific problem because in the US 70% of Amazon is probably retail, where Amazon ships itself, and 80-90% is FBA, which is fulfilled by Amazon. And there was no way for a lot of sellers to ship it to Amazon. So we said, okay, hey, that's okay. We'll build a service called EasyShip, and what EasyShip does is it goes to the seller and takes the product and then delivers to the customer directly without that product going to the FBA through an Amazon warehouse. So that is direct shipping from the seller to the customer. It doesn't exist in the US. It was built in India to provide a better experience to third-party seller orders, and it worked really well. And that was something which reduced timings. If you still have merchant fulfilled network, which is what sellers themselves ship it, those orders we always see a lot of challenges, and that experience is not at par with the EasyShip offer. So that was something we built using customer feedback. Absolutely. So it's not just one product manager. It's basically one product manager might be leading the whole program, but he has to align, which is what I spoke about in the alignment part. A lot of partner teams. So if I'm an EasyShip product manager and I'm building something for India, I got to work with 10 other product managers to make sure it happens. But I remain the leader of the feature, and then multiple people actually worked on it as well. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is confidential because a lot of systems in Amazon pricing are confidential. But we do have a lot of tools for sellers to automate their prices. So it's if you're a bookseller, it's very hard for you to keep changing your prices on every inventory you have. So we built a lot of automated tools who would make sure that, hey, you want to win the buy box on Amazon, and that is the buy box winning prize. And you will make sure there are tools like that which are and those are publicly available, so I can talk about those. The seller can actually set his buy box rule that, hey, I want to be always equal to the buy box price. So even if I'm not winning the buy box right now, I want to be at the same price as the buy box winner. So those rules exist, and those are the automated systems we build to enable sellers to price better. So we also build a lot of tools for India-specific sellers, that how can they match, prices of other sellers, not just in Amazon but elsewhere, and how can they make prices sharper. So that's something we build in an automated way. I'm sorry? Dynamic pricing, well, depends on the seller again, because Amazon in India is a marketplace facilitator. So we've given those tools to sellers which would ensure the seller is always competitive. And to stay competitive, very often you might have to do price changes because the market itself, the prices are moving. So that way prices are dynamic, but we don't do differential pricing. So you and I, whichever part of the world we might be in, will not see different prices unless we are having different currencies. If you and I are in India, we'll see the same price. Right, that's a very good question. And an input-driven metrics would be, let's say, what's my fast track delivery percentage? So Amazon could be tracking how many of my, what percentage of my inventory is eligible for a one-day delivery. So you don't have the one-day delivery option on all the inventory, right? So let's say if we look at, there could be like 10 million products on Amazon, and out of that 2 million could be enabled on fast track delivery. And then I could be looking at those metrics that, hey, how do I increase this number? How do I make my prices more sharper? That could be one metric. How do I look at in-stock metrics? So you'll have products, but they could be out of stock as well. So how do I look at in-stock, where my key sellers are in stock with those products? So in-stock pricing, what's my selection? So I just spoke about 10 million, that was the number I just came up on the fly, but we also track how many unique selection, what unique selection is part of Amazon. So how many unique products are there? And then what's the experience like? How many are shipped by the seller themselves? How many are fulfilled by Amazon? And so forth. And also the pin codes we serve, that's also an important input. So how many pin codes have COD enabled? How many pin codes have exchange orders enabled? Those are all inputs we work on. Right. So you'll not find people in Amazon saying conversion dipped. Kya kare? That's there are companies who work that way. What we look at is, hey, my in-stock dipped. What do we do? My pricing is not sharp. What do I do? My delivery times are increasing. What do I do? Those are all inputs. So customer discovery is an important part of any feature design. So how will the customer discover? How will the customer interact with the feature? So if I am launching no-cost TMI on Amazon, and it was launched a year back, how will the customer discover it? Where will it be shown? Is it easy or not? Is it the best solution I can give to the customer right now? Many times, like if you see the display of no-cost TMI, it doesn't come in search at times. So it's important because you might be looking at TVs and you want to know that I want to buy TVs and no-cost TMI, and it should be shown in the search. Otherwise, you'll not go to the display page and figure out that I want to look at TVs which have no-cost TMI. So maybe I should give you a filter. But those things, so we launch a feature and we have a plan around it that, hey, this is how the customer will discover it. This is the first phase of launch, so the customer may not see it in the search results. We'll only see it in the detail page. Right. No, we do a lot of validations as well. So before launching anything, the UX team would, the user research team will go along with product managers and meet a bunch of customers. We'll also A/B test a whole lot. So should I put no-cost TMI on search? First of all, the search team should have bandwidth to prioritize in their roadmap. Provided they don't have the bandwidth, I might just launch it on the detail page itself. But then as soon as they have bandwidth, the first thing they'll do is do A/B testing. Does it really make an impact? Does it really go well with customers? There are certain things which we believe customers are important for customers. So for example, this no-cost TMI appearing in... Exactly. PMs own it along with site merchandisers who manage the what should come where. Again, a good question. So we only collect data which is based on the customer footprint on Amazon, and it was the same at Ola as well. I will not go out to a third party and tell him that, hey, I have this customer, this is the phone number, go get me his social media profile. We don't do that. There are companies who do that though. I don't know how cool Facebook is about sharing data, but we don't do that. I mean, even Ola was very, very particular. We will not even allow Facebook Connect. So if you see Amazon and Ola, both of them, we don't allow Facebook Connects. There are startups like Fresh Menu who would want people to come in and create an account very fast. They would allow you to log in through Facebook, but that means sharing your data with Facebook. And we were not comfortable doing that. And it's not just Amazon, and also Ola wasn't comfortable doing it. Even Uber is not comfortable doing it. So there are pros and cons to connecting with Facebook, but I can guarantee you, your footprint is what your interactions on Amazon. These are the products you've browsed. These are the payment methods you've used. We don't go out of that, footprint and search you on social media or something and get information about you. I'm sorry? What is that? I'm sorry. Okay. So in Amazon, nobody has access to customer data. So even a data scientist who is running models will not have access to a customer ID and his data. You can't do that. The data exists in the logs. Nobody has access, to a customer ID versus his logs. You can build models on top of it, but you can't, I can't remove that data. I can't retrieve that data from the logs and say this customer, this is when he was looking at so and so things. So it's not easy. Even if I have to run a query, I can only get certain things. I can't get your address or your phone number or all other things. So that way it's well protected.
So the company is got an output-based approach because of legacy systems.
Mm-hmm.
And suppose you are going to a company of that sort and said that we need to make the change, probably do an input-based approach. What difficulties do you face?
Well, you got to work your way around. So as I said, I worked in companies where they were output-driven, but you got to say that, hey, for you to do this, meet this booking target, you got to make so and so a habit for the customer. So when I was at Ola, very often the targets were top down, that hey, we want to reach so and so bookings this quarter. As a product team, what can you do? You're the owner of engagement. You got to make customers come to Ola again and again. I want to meet this booking target, and you got to build features which will give control versus test X additional bookings every day. Now that is how things started at Ola. So when I joined Ola, Bhavish would meet me and tell me that, hey, your target should be 30,000 bookings a day. Or, I'm just making up that number, but X number of bookings a day. And I'll be like, okay, now what do I do about it? And then so very often in Indian startups, you don't really have solid product management cultures, which means people will not A/B test. I remember the time Ola outstation team, they were telling, hey, all the outstation bookings are because we made the product. And this is the revenue we're making. And that's not the way to identify it, right? So when you're launching something, you got to say, this is how the BAU was. And this is how, after my launch, this is how it is now. So incremental, an A/B test. And to build that culture in a company, you need to have founders which are which are really cool about A/B testing and really want to do it. There are a lot of companies in India who do a lot of A/B testing. A lot of companies in India don't do A/B testing. So which means you'll be a product manager who will identify customer problems, but you'll never be able to look at those results in a systematic way. But it's important to solve problems anywhere you are. So whether it's in an output-driven company where as a product guy you'll be given a bookings target that hey, but yeah, I got to work around it because somebody has to work there and solve the customer problem, right? So there are cultures, there are different leaderships, there are different founders, but you got to work with those. And
A/B testing is a good tool.
Yeah.
Start making that change perception within the organization.
Exactly. So that's important. So slowly organizations are moving towards it. But as I said, a lot of Indian founders don't have a product background. So it will take that time. But wherever you work, you got to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And if you're not doing A/B testing, if you're not able to articulate what is the impact of the feature, and if you're not able to even decide, then you're not a product manager, you're a program manager then. And very often you would have a lot of product managers in Indian startups doing program management and not even knowing that's not product management. So, Right. No, I mean, you could be, I mean, I can tell you there are smaller startups which are input driven, which are customer backwards. So a company called Urban Ladder stopped, taking customer orders because they couldn't fulfill it. So, and they are absolutely customer backwards. I'm not saying, there are a lot of companies that are customer backwards. In fact, there are output driven companies also. Yeah. I understand that. Very. So an input-driven culture works best when you are long-term. Right. I mean, you can still be input-driven and do what is best for the customer, but you'll also be concerned about the metrics, the outputs. How does it really? Exactly. All I can say is you could be output focused too. I mean, there's nothing wrong in it. Just that it won't give you any additional benefits of not being input focused. So if you're doing the right thing for the customer and you show that you're doing the right thing, it's important. You would do it irrespective of whether it's going to work or not, give you a better bottom line or not. And that's how you build a sustainable business. But yeah, there are companies which work the output way as well. Not saying that's wrong. It's just that you got to then build. Exactly. But you will still have to work on your inputs. Yes, that's where the approach comes in. Any questions? So I had those slides. I'll probably getting hired as a PM. So very often the questions they're going to ask you are not rocket science. It's going to be about the first 5 minutes is going to be about tell us something about yourself. And it's important for you not to speak beyond 5 minutes. Every product management interview would start with tell us something about yourself. So you should be very crisp and sharp. And just take 5 minutes. Don't take more than 5 minutes. Don't ramble for 20 minutes because a product management interview itself is about 50 minutes to 1 hour. And nobody's going to give you more than 10 minutes to talk about yourself. To talk about yourself, then there are different companies who approach product management interviews differently. Essentially, there are design problems. So they could be design the next generation GPS system or design a bike for an old man or an old woman. Or design how would Uber accept, let's say, certain types of payments in India. Let's say Ola has an Ola credit, and how would Uber launch Uber Pay Later or Uber Credit in India, where you can keep taking rides and then pay upfront later on. or how would Flipkart launch buy now, pay later, or those could be design questions where you got to go to the whiteboard and tell them this is how the user flow would be. Design questions can also be on products which you already shipped. So if you already have a product management background, this is what you did when you launched this feature, this is how the user flow was. So that's critical. Then there's analytical questions. So these could be guesstimates. Very often Google will ask you guesstimates on how many users exist with so and so, or no, I mean design is product design. So how will the UX is a part of it, but a product design is not just about the UX. It's also about what the features would be. So if let's say WhatsApp exists today for consumers, how would a WhatsApp be for a business? Like can they have automated replies or something? So sure. So I have some questions here. Exactly. So all they're trying to do is test how you want to approach a user and his problem. So these actually are actual questions, and so estimate the number of Instagram accounts added in India in 2016. That was actually asked to a friend of mine. FB revamped its new newsfeed algo. What are the top 5 metrics you'll track? So analytical and market sizing put together, and then it could be as simple as how many autos exist in Bangalore. Very huge overlap with consulting questions. Then a design problem, which is where you got to think out of the box. These are all Google questions, by the way, and again I have got it through different forums. Then there could be problem solving questions where how can you create an affordability index for Amazon in India, or how should Swiggy personalize its restaurant listings? So right now you and I probably see the same restaurant in the same order. That was 1 year back. Now Swiggy has started personalizing the order in which you and I will see. So if I eat biryani more, I'll probably see biryani places up front. And if you eat Chettinad chicken more, and you will see Chettinad chicken on top, which is restaurant serving that Chettinad chicken will be on top. So that's a real problem. That's actually been asked in some interviews. And then there are behavioral questions. So Amazon interviews especially are very behavioral, where they'll ask you the biggest achievement of your work experience and then talk through it in detail. Amazon likes to dive deep and ask you questions which are detailed. So even if you don't remember certain things about your feature, there'll be a director sitting interviewing you who will be interested in what you did in this situation, because that's how they work. Narrate a time when you disagreed with your manager. That's a very common question, not just in Amazon but in elsewhere, where you got to narrate a real life example of how you approach certain behavioral situations. And that's critical. So some questions are here, and generally PM questions at Amazon test one or more Amazon leadership principles. So Amazon has 14 leadership principles. If you really want to get hired at Amazon, there's a book called Amazon the Everything Store, which is about Amazon in general. If you read that book, you get to know how Amazon works and how Amazon, how people talk in Amazon, what are the terms they use. And then there is the leadership principles. So very often leadership principles are about tell me an incident in your life when you did something about so and so thing. So it's important for you to go through those leadership principles and remember incidents in your life which cater to those principles, where you'll be asked to some questions on those. You should also ask questions to the interviewer, and that's important not just in an Amazon interview but elsewhere. Whichever company you interview with, you should have some smart questions for the interviewer at the end, and that's super important. Remember, all this will probably happen in an hour, and you'll probably have 4-5 rounds before you select it. So it's super important not to ramble. Always be structured, and that's the number one feedback I get from recruiters from different companies. And I used to be hiring a whole lot in the last 2-3 years. I've hired a whole lot. And very often I meet people who are not structured, who don't know what they're talking very often, who make up stories on the fly, and that's not acceptable. You got to be structured, you got to be user focused, customer backwards, and those product managers are very hard to find in India. And it's very important for you to be structured, even if you don't work in a company which is structured. There are a lot of startups where product managers are not very structured, but as a product manager, you should have that pride in doing things the right way, and measuring things the right way, because otherwise you're not doing product management the right way. Sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, you could hear that some of us who don't have any product management experience, but of some other function for many years, and we have taken this intervention. How practical is it for us to apply and really even get our CV, not just for a cost? Because that's the biggest problem, we even get a cost.
Right. Right. Again, it depends on the company. So there could be companies which are open to a lot of senior folks at a lateral position being hired. There is Amazon, which only hires PMs mostly from campuses. And if at all they do come to this campus, and then they would probably hire. Otherwise, they don't hire a lot of people directly out of the school. They do allow career shifts. So a lot of companies do allow career shifts. But it's again harder to convince people, harder to get your resume screened first. But if you've done something on the product side already in your current work experience, it's always helpful. If you've been a product owner, if you're not a product manager, a product owner is somebody who manages one feature and takes it to completion. That's a good experience to have. So look for avenues in your current role where you could show those things. I'm not really sure. I could probably think more in detail on how this batch could get those openings. But I think it's not just about getting you the right skills to be a product manager, which you're learning in this institute. But it's also important for a recruiter. And I'm not a recruiter myself, but I know how they think. They should be willing to take a bet on your resume and forward it to the hiring manager. And that's where it's slightly harder. The more experience you get, and the more experience you get in a particular domain, whether it's development managers or program managers, it's a little harder, but it's not impossible. I mean, it does take. It should have some spark in your CV for.
Here's the question that everybody who comes here says is that in India it's very difficult to find product managers who are customer buyers.
Right.
So when we spend 18 months here, from day one, that's the thought process that is getting instilled in us. I mean, when you said custom backwards, none of us would have been shocked with us. It's already part of our DNA. But we come from different backgrounds. We're taking this, it shows that eagerness when we do something like this in India, the Indian economy is moving that. Now, what would make the recruiters take notice of this? Now, look, this is a place which is actually building the assets that will come to the organization. So they might have to break their own thinking mode and think out of the box. And what we come here and see what happens. So with them, then I'm going to do it.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And we do have people in Amazon moving to product management roles. So there are people in operations who move to product management roles. There are people in development who move to product management roles. It's not difficult, just that it's easier internally to move versus a recruiter. Now, a recruiter would obviously go by the book and try to increase the way he would increase his conversion of a resume to a hire. So if you know people directly, it's always helpful. It's always helpful to get into a startup, start product management there, and then move to Amazon, because Amazon does hire from all the startups. It's even easier. I mean, Google also hires from all the startups. I know a lot of people who work in startups get Google calls. It's super hard to clear that interview though. But yes, so if you are a product manager in a startup which is having some popularity or some traction, or you're even in a B2B company, there could be B2B companies old like Cisco, or if you get there, and so those require really hard technical product managers. It's easier to get there if you have a technical background. So you can move from there to a consumer focused company. But as I said, if you know people really well and they know you really well, that you can do that job, the hiring manager himself can actually hire you. It's harder with the recruiter. So I have hired people from engineering and analytical background without an MBA into product because they were good. And an MBA doesn't really make you smart, right? I mean, I don't know what 2 years I did in my MBA added a lot of value. I read a ton of books and learned to probably make presentations. I don't use that skill anymore because I write docs in Amazon. I don't know why even MBA is a requirement for a product guy. In India, it just makes people believe that you're smarter. In the US, Google hires a lot of non-MBAs as PMs. They do hire MBAs as well. So, I mean, the jury is still out whether it really helps you or not. But if you know people really well, and that's where networking really comes in. if you network with people and if they know you smarter and then you could take that role, I think it's easy to switch. Also, when you really go ahead in a ladder in a technical role or a dev manager role, you'll probably be earning a whole lot than an entry-level product manager. So very often people are not able to convince recruiters that they are willing to take a pay cut, because you want to move to a new field where, depending on that skill set, you may not be paid that much. So that's another call you got to take. And I know people who actually have taken that call. So it's not difficult. It just needs a lot of mental conditioning to leave your comfort zone and do something else. Yeah.
So, related question. So, how do you? So far, I don't know whether Amazon has raw IPL in campus.
Sure.
How do you get Amazon to IPL?
Well, I don't manage the whole recruitment bit, but I can have a word with the recruiter for sure. That there are people there. Again, it depends upon the recruiter's bandwidth to establish a relationship with the institute. Also depends on how many we're hiring. Right now, we're not hiring that much in product because the company itself hired a whole lot. Yes, it depends upon the recruiter and the college making a connect. Sure. If you have somebody from Amazon studying here, that would probably help.
So, not just studying here, we have the industry connects that we make, like people like you.
Sure.
And that's the
Sure.
idea, right?
I mean, I can connect you with people because I don't hold that decision to go somewhere or not.
No, I think what you can take back is you can always take back a message.
Sure.
This is what is happening here.
Sure.
Here.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then you does that, you want other channels.
Sure.
So you have to look at this channel.
Sure.
You can come here and do our product.
Sure. I'll definitely pass that word. Yeah. Sure. Sorry, what industrial domain?
Industrial domain product management is maintenance of the equipment. So how easy of such domain PMs getting transferred into consumer?
I mean, it would not be very easy because again the recruiter has to be convinced. I think a better approach would be to start with a startup, because you know how a product is built and you know the basics of product management. You met customers, you know what customers really want from your product. Once you've done that, once you build that skill of knowing what the customers want from any product and how to approach customers and talk to them and figure out this is what they want, I think that is the more important skill. But I guess startups, it's easier to convince. And once you enter a startup, you do that job for a couple of years or a year or so, and then you can move on to any company you want. So that's what my recommendation would be. Yeah. Also, there are a lot of companies which don't really, incubate product managers that well. Which means, let's say companies like Adobe, where I worked for 2 years. That's not a company where a fresh graduate from any B school can go and learn product management. Not an easy company because they have bigger products and lesser product managers. You've got to be on the ground really quickly. They don't really have a boot camp or a mentorship program where you can learn product management. So there are companies where you can learn product management, and that's super important. I mean, my first 2 years was in Zynga, where it was so heavy on experimentation, and we were running games which was played by millions of people. I used to manage Mafia Wars, and it was played by millions of people that time on Facebook. And of course, it's shut down now because the games have a life cycle. But we had so much data around how people playing, and we had such good systems and such good A/B testing practices that it was easier for me to learn product management, and it was very structured and very, very, a wonderful place to learn. So when I look back those 2 years, I actually would have, worked there for free. I mean, because it was so important going forward, because once you learn a skill, then you can use it anywhere you want. So look for places where, if you're not getting a chance in top MNCs in terms of product management, look for startups where you trust the founder that they make sense, they are data driven and they are customer backwards. And then join them in the product role. Tell them that you want to take a punt. They can take a punt on you, and convince those people to get into those roles. And once you excel there, once you learn the trade, then you can work anywhere you want in the world. I mean, Indian product managers are in great demand from not just in the Valley. It's harder in the US because of the visa restrictions, but it's easier. So Booking.com hires a ton of Indian PMs from various Indian startups. Google hires from India, Facebook hires from India. And of course, your Singaporean Grab taxi, half of Ola PM is bandwidth is in Grab taxi now. So India is a great place for you to experience the market, learn the skill, and then you can use it anywhere you want because it's such a tough market to be in, right? I mean, you have so much competition and you have so many different types of customers. And you also have good engineers here, which is why it's easy to build products here and it's easy to start companies. But once you learn the skill, I mean, anywhere you can work. So that's important. Any questions? Okay. Thanks. Sure. I'll share it. Yeah. Thanks. Sure. Oh. Sure. Congrats, Ashish. Well done. Okay. Thank you. Hi, Sandeep. Well done. Hi, Ravi.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah.
Sure. This camera.
No?
Where are you from? Rajasthan?
No. Bangalore.
Oh, okay.
It's not Ravi, it's Ravi.
Oh, okay. It looks like B though.
Ah, see. Thank you.
Sure. Congrats. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
This precious time, we spent a nice Saturday evening with the corporate husband, so we'll now give a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, I don't need the charger. Yeah.
Amazon, somebody called Vyom Kandolia.
No.
Okay, he's actually studying engineering.
Okay.
My previous
What's your name?
My name is Sandeep.
Hi, Sandeep. Sure. I'll just drink some water.
अच्छा किताब है हमें पता नहीं है we'll have to read and take
Come to center.
Okay. Anybody here?
Record. वो मुश्किल पड़ेगा. Yeah, Saurabh, we can
Sure.
get an email and.
Yeah. Sure.
maybe can write it on the board.
Yeah.
If we bombard